This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Guineans vote in crucial presidential election. ICC delegation arrives in Sudan to discuss case against al-Bashir. And Israel-Bahrain diplomatic ties to formally begin Sunday. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, IMF revises Nigeria's economic forecast as government turns down a relief package. And in your sport, Kenya's national boxing team hits camp as it prepares for last round of Tokyo 2020 qualifiers. Well, let's begin the hour in Nigeria, where at least 14 soldiers have been killed in a suspected Islamist attack on an army base. According to military sources, the attack took place in Jakana, around 25 kilometers from the Borno state capital of Maiduguri. Witnesses say suspected militants allied to the Islamic State of West Africa province, or ISWAP, seized 4 trucks fitted machine guns in the raid. Several soldiers are still missing and are said to have either escaped or were captured by the militants. ISWAP has been targeting army bases and soldiers since breaking away from Boko Haram. Well, to bring us the latest on that attack, CGTN's Deji Badmos now joins us from Lagos. Deji, thank you so much for joining us. What is the latest on the attack on the Nigerian army base?
Well, Hannah, there's actually nothing yet. The military has not said anything about the attack, but what we're learning is that this attack actually happened in a place called Jakana, as you have reported, just 25 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital of Borno State, which is, of course, the birthplace of Boko Haram. That military base has been attacked several times in the past, but this time we understand 14 soldiers were killed and that the militants actually seized quite a number of ammunition. So, but there's been no confirmation at all. The attack, we understand, happened late Friday. Nothing. The military hasn't said anything at all. We're still waiting. Just before we came on air, I tried to speak with the spokesperson of the Nigerian military. Unfortunately, he said he was in church, so well, we're still waiting to get reaction from him. We've actually sent him messages, but as we speak, Hannah, nothing forthcoming from the Nigerian military. There's been no confirmation of the attack, nothing at all.
As you've said, they seized arms, so militants having arms, especially now, not a good sign at all. But Islamic State West Africa province fighters, Deji, are said to have been behind the attacks. Have they claimed responsibility? And what else can you tell us about their operations in Nigeria?
Well, first off, Hannah, the Islamic State West African province has not claimed responsibility. Usually, they don't always claim responsibility, but if we're going to see one, we just have to wait. But up till this moment, no group has claimed responsibility for the attack. What we know about the Islamic State West African province, we know it's a breakaway faction of Boko Haram, and we know it has been led by, at some point, by the son of the founder of Boko Haram himself, Al-Banawi. Now, what we can tell you is that we know that part of the modus operandi of ISWAP is to attack hard targets, if you like. I'm talking about military facilities and military locations. So it's the reason why the group has been suspected, has been responsible now for these attacks. The group has carried out several attacks in the past, of course, targeting military locations. So, but they have actually not claimed responsibility for this attack, even though it bears all the hallmark of their kind of operations. Hannah?
Deji, so from what we're hearing that the Nigerian government has announced a major nationwide anti-terror operation. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, that operation is called Operation Crocodile Smile. It's a routine operation that happens every year. And I think this will be the 6th one. It started about 6 years ago. So it's, but this year, what the military says is that it is targeting cyber fraudsters. So it's cyber fraudsters that the military says it is targeting with the operation this year. Actually not aimed at, well, really not specifically against Boko Haram, but of course the military made it clear that they would also be aiming to unravel, with this operation now, to unravel the sponsors of Boko Haram, how they get their funding and all of that. But, you know, we've had this before. Boko Haram has been in operation now for quite a number of years, over 10 years now, and no one has been able to crack their source of funding. But the military says with the current Operation Crocodile Smile, which is expected to start on Tuesday, I think, that it hopes to unravel the financiers of Boko Haram using cyber operations, and also go after cyber fraudsters as well. But, you know, we just have to wait and see how the operation plays out. But that operation begins on Tuesday, the 20th, and is expected to last till the end of the year. And as I said, it's an annual operation that has been taking place now for the past 6 years. Anna?
Thank you so much for that. Deji Badmus joining us live from Lagos. Well, we stay in West Africa, and Guinea's President Alpha Conde is seeking a fresh mandate to lead the sub-Saharan African country for another 5-year term. The law professor has promised to ensure the country is placed on a clear path towards economic development, CGTN's Enoch Sikolia reports.
President Alpha Conde is seeking to extend his rule as Guineans line up to cast their ballots. His move to seek a 3rd term has been opposed by some. A long-time opposition figure in Guinea, Conde became the West African country's first democratically elected leader in 2010. His election brought hope of progress after years of dictatorship and military rule. The 82-year-old is facing competition from 11 candidates. Conde says he needs another term to set Guinea on a democratic path, as well as complete major mining and infrastructure projects in the country of 12 million people. Guinea is rich in gold, bauxite, and iron ore. During his presidency, the country has made progress in tapping its mineral riches by approving plans to develop the giant Simandu iron ore mine. Conde has pledged to boost the country's energy production capacity by nearly 4-fold over the next 6 years. Guinea currently has a power production capacity of 658 megawatts. Conde has served for 2 terms, having been elected president in 2010 and again in 2015. But he is well known for spending decades in opposition to a succession of regimes and successfully running against President Lansana Conte in the 1993 and 1998 presidential polls and leading the rally of the Guinea People Party. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN.
Conde's main challenger is former Prime Minister Cellou Dalein Diallo. Diallo has lost 2 elections against Conde, but is convinced he will win this time. CGTN's Wilke Sanyawa reports.
Days before the polls opened, Guinea's 2 main contenders in the presidential elections held final rallies in the capital, Conakry, in a last-bid attempt to sway voters to their side. 11 candidates are vying to unseat 82-year-old incumbent President Alpha Conde, but the frontrunner among them is 68-year-old Cellou Dalein Diallo. Diallo, who was a prime minister from 2004 to 2006, is well known to Guineans as he has unsuccessfully run against Conde in 2 previous presidential elections. He returned to the country's capital ahead of the elections to thousands of cheering supporters.
Since 2010, I've not seen a comparable crowd. The people of Conakry have come out in mass on the highway towards the People's Palace. I noticed with a lot of satisfaction people's sympathy, those on the side of the road, towards me and my convoy.
But unseating Conde will be a massive task. Salou Diallo studied at the Center for Financial, Economic and Banking Studies in Paris. He has held several positions in government. From 1985 to 1995, Diallo worked at the Central Bank of the Republic of Guinea. In 1996, he became the Minister of Transport, Telecommunications and Tourism. He was subsequently moved to the position of Minister of Infrastructure in 1997, where he remained until he was appointed as Minister of Public Works and Transport in 1999. In December 2004, then President Lansana Conté appointed Diallo as Prime Minister of Guinea. However, hardly 2 years later, allegations of corruption coupled with disagreements with Conté's top associates culminated in Diallo's removal from his position as Prime Minister. Now Diallo is making a third attempt at beating Condé. Guinea produces almost a quarter of the world's bauxite, and Diallo has promised to ensure the benefits trickle down to citizens.
The handling of the mines in the country, they say it's a geological scandal. Today, Guinea's metal is in demand. We will reach 100 million tons of bauxite export soon. We need to make sure that this happens with full transparency and that the resulting revenues can be used to finance a high-performance education system and a competitive farming system.
Diallo and Condé come from different ethnic groups. Condé is mainly backed by the Malinke people, while Diallo is supported by the Fulani people. Diallo, who has received massive support on the streets, will be hoping to see this support reflected at the polls. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
An international criminal court delegation has arrived in Khartoum to discuss the prosecution of former President Omar al-Bashir. Bashir is wanted by the ICC on charges of genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity. According to Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, the delegation will be in the country until October the 21st to discuss cooperation in the case. The ICC team includes Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda. Through a peace deal with rebels in the western region of Darfur, the government has agreed to set up a special court on war crimes that would include Bashir. The UN estimates that 300,000 people were killed in the conflict, which began after a revolt in Darfur in 2003. The ICC has also charged two other former officials, Ahmed Haroun and Abdelrahim Mohammed Hussein, with war crimes and crimes against humanity allegedly committed in the region. Well, CGTN's Patrick Oye joins us from Juba for the latest. Patrick, the prosecution of former President Omar al-Bashir is high on the ICC's delegation agenda during their visit to Sudan. Having followed this story as closely as you have, Patrick, how do you think Sudan might deal with the ICC's request to prosecute the former president?
Hannah, the International Criminal Court's main aim, of course, is to take the case to Hague, where they would try former President Omar al-Bashir and the rest of the people who are suspected of having committed several crimes in the Sudan. But experts here say that the interest of Sudan's current government is to try Bashir in Sudan. Now, trial has already also begun on Bashir, and that makes the case very complicated for ICC because apparently in Sudan now the law provides that when somebody has been taken to court, there are ways in which the case can come to an end. Number one is to try the person, conclude the case, and find out whether the person is guilty or innocent. If he's innocent, set him free. Number two is for the government, especially when this case is prosecuted by the government like this, then the government has to stay the proceeding, meaning they have to withdraw the case. But the challenge with withdrawing the case is that if you withdraw the case, you cannot come back again and prosecute the same person. So if they are going to withdraw the case, they will withdraw the case to let former President Omar al-Bashir go to Hague, which at the moment they may not be willing to do because they are also fearing setting a precedent. Because remember, former President Omar al-Bashir was in power for 30 years. So many people, many of the people in the Sovereign Council now worked with him. So what if they take Bashir to Hague and the case comes back also to them that they are also needed there? That would be a challenge. Number two is that the public interest is very high on this case. The public want to know what is going on. So the government would most likely want to try Bashir by themselves so that they also score some points as some of the achievements that they have, made in the Sudan. So that's why you see the number of days the team from the ICC is going to spend in Sudan is a lot. That means the discussion really is going to be intense. Issues are going to be very, very serious over there.
Patrick, you've touched on this a little bit, but perhaps you can just expand a bit more on how far the process of setting up a special court on war crimes that would include Bashir has gone, and how would it affect the ICC's discussions on the prosecution of the former president?
Yeah, that is something that has been agreed, of course, in the peace deal. The parties that have agreed are yet to return to Khartoum. If they go to Khartoum, they are supposed to set up again a new government, because 3 members of the Sudan Revolutionary Front have to join the Sovereign Council. 25% of the National Legislative Assembly have to be occupied by them. 40% of the state governments in the states where they are present should be occupied by them. So it is only when that is done, that is when now they can move to set up that special court or tribunal that would try people who are suspects of having committed crimes during the long years of war in the Sudan. So yes, the process has not yet started. It is a long process that people are waiting to see how it will go on.
Patrick, thank you so much for all that detail and giving us the latest. Patrick Ayer joining us from South Sudan's Juba. Well, the African Union and the International Organization for Migration have launched their first joint migration report. It indicates that African migration in the 21st century actually takes place mainly on land and not by sea, as many believe. African migrant destinations are also surprisingly not to Europe or North America, but rather to countries on the continent. Here's CGTN's Guram Chala with more details.
The first AU-IOM report, dubbed Africa Migration Report challenging the narrative, has just been released, and it has some historic findings in it. It says that contrary to entrenched old perceptions, many African migrants actually head to different African states than to Europe or North America. It also states that although perilous journeys are claiming lives of migrants, the free movement of people largely benefits the continent.
It's important to look at the Free Movement Protocol alongside 2 other critical decisions that the African Union took in 2018, these being the Continental Free Trade Area and the Single African Air Transport Market. Looked at collectively, these 3 key pieces of AU decisions have the potential to very positively impact the development fortunes and economic fortunes, I should add, of the continent in a way that no amount of development assistance ever could.
The International Organization for Migration and the African Union Commission have in their joint report unpacked some commonly held misconceptions about migration on the continent. IOM Director General Antonio Vitorino said this continent-specific report has become even more relevant for people to read given the current global health pandemic. He says efforts of frontline workers in Africa and across the world must be recognized in these COVID-19 tough times.
They are the real-life heroes, rising to meet extreme challenges, engaging in extraordinary acts of humanity. Last year, our humanitarian teams reached more than 28 million people living in crisis situations around the globe. This year, the number of people in need of life-saving assistance has grown. More people have been displaced within the confines of their own countries than any other time in history.
The African Union wants to use the result of the collaborative initiative to begin laying the foundations for important future work on migration policy and operational work in Africa. This is uniquely critical for the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the Continental Free Movement Protocol, which is adopted but is yet to come into force. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The foreign ministers of Egypt and Spain have met in Cairo to sign an agreement of cooperation to aid Libya and Lebanon in their economic and political situation. Libya was plunged into chaos when a NATO-backed popular uprising in 2011 toppled the government of Muammar Gaddafi, who was later killed. The country has since been split between rival administrations based in the capital Tripoli and the eastern city of Benghazi, each backed by armed groups and rival foreign governments.
تتدخل في ليبيا ليس من منطلق
There are countries that intervene in Libya not out of a sense of protecting the security of the Libyan people, but out of expansionist policies, and they do not have direct interests that follow such intervention. We imagine whenever we strengthen the dialogue among the Libyans, and this is what Egypt is doing through hosting the Libyan dialogues, we restore Libya to its stability and full sovereignty without interference from any party who has no right to do so.
Let's now take a short break and return. More news making headlines, including Israel and Bahrain diplomatic ties to formally begin Sunday. And new curfew takes effect in France.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Aden, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, welcome back. You're watching News Making Headlines right here on Africa Live. Well, let's now head to the Middle East, where Israel and Bahrain are set to officially establish diplomatic relations on Sunday at a ceremony in Manama. This is according to an Israeli official. The two states reached a U.S.-brokered normalization deal last month. A visiting delegation from Israel and officials in Bahrain will sign a joint communique that will see the establishment of full diplomatic relations. The two nations will then be free to open embassies in each other's countries. The United Arab Emirates and Bahrain are the latest Arab states to agree to normalize ties with Israel following Egypt's peace deal with Israel in 1979 and a 1994 pact with Jordan. Well, CGTN's Stephanie Freed joins us for more detail on this formalization of ties between Israel and Bahrain. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us. What is the significance of today's ceremony, Stephanie?
Well, Hannah, this is just about taking the peace declaration that was signed in Washington a few weeks ago, just taking it one step further and basically making it a little bit more official. Like you said, they're going to be signing a joint communique. This is a 7-hour trip, and this is a delegation that's going in, headed by the director of Israel's national security. Also on board will be the director of the foreign ministry, the acting director of the prime minister's office. And as we understand from the national security director, they're going to break into working teams with their Bahraini counterparts. And they'll be talking about mutual tourism, mutual investment, mutual trade, agriculture, tech, definitely security and security interests in the region. And as the acting director of security said, as he headed to Bahrain, this is about taking practical plans one step further and coming to concrete agreements. So again, they're going to be on the ground for 7 hours. That's it. Definitely, they will be meeting again to further these agreements, take these a step further. And in 2 days, the United Arab Emirates, a delegation from there, will be coming to Israel for the first time for historic meetings as well. Hannah.
Stephanie, once Israel and Bahrain establish formal diplomatic relations, you have mentioned a little bit of what could happen just in terms of agreements. Have you heard anything concrete of what is expected to happen next in the U.S.-backed process to normalize these Israeli-Arab ties?
Well, what we're seeing already being put into place, let's say the first agreement that Israel reached on normalization of ties was with the United Arab Emirates, and what we're seeing already, and one could assume that we'll see the same happen with Bahrain, that the agreements will follow suit. We're already seeing talks of the first flights, first commercial flights, first tourism flights, delegates coming over, arrangements of business arrangements that are already in the works, companies setting up shop, Israeli companies setting up shop in the United Arab Emirates. So those sorts of things. Again, security is vital here. Certainly security interests that all the sides share in common. So that will certainly also be on the agenda, putting plans of security into action, mutual interests again there. It'll just be about moving these agreements forward and putting them into action. Banking, tourism, when the skies open up, and so on and so forth. So that's really what we can anticipate in the very near future, because things are moving very quickly on these agreements and on taking them to the next level. Hannah.
And we can see that already. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Stephanie Free joining us live from Tel Aviv. Well, one of China's strategies to eradicate poverty has been to pair cities and advanced regions with less developed areas. Our reporter Yang Jinghao reports on how that policy has helped students in Guizhou province with their education.
Zhang Wen greets her students at the school gate every morning, giving them high fives and hugs. A teacher from Guangzhou, one of China's most developed cities, Zhang came to Nayong County in 2018 to support local education. Her empathy and thoughtfulness have earned her the nickname Principal Mom.
It's a sacred title. Whenever the children call me mom, I feel a greater sense of responsibility. I tell myself that I had to do more to live up to their expectations.
Nayong is one of the last counties to be taken off China's poverty list. For decades, education here has lagged behind due to its lack of development. But now, with the support from Guangzhou, change is in the air. With investment of about $6 million, this well-equipped school has started to enroll children from remote villages this year, and Zhang was assigned as its first principal. Prior to this, she worked as a deputy chief at the local educational bureau and visited almost all of the schools in the area, trying to bring something new to rural teachers.
The children here are actually smart. Their level of learning will improve once the teaching methods change. I don't mean to say the teachers are unqualified here, but in view of the tough circumstances, they need to be guided and inspired.
Many of the students are left behind children, meaning their parents are working away in the big cities. Besides securing financial support from entrepreneurs, Zhang says she treats each of the students like her own, providing them with care and support in their daily lives. She even helped a boy receive treatment for a deadly tumor in a Guangzhou hospital. To improve the overall quality of education, Zhang has brought in more teachers from Guangzhou who share the advanced teaching philosophy and methods.
Education is an effective way of preventing the intergenerational transmission of poverty. Through education, we can change a child, a family, and eventually bring change to the whole nation.
Zhang says she just hopes that by taking advantage of the power of the developed areas, she can help local principals and teachers become more capable, turning them into lighthouses that can illuminate the path of children towards a better future. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Guizhou Province.
Well, here in Africa, some countries have the highest poverty rates in the world, but they've also made great achievements in fighting it. Some of them, in South Africa, for instance, the government is taking measures to help impoverished communities and fight inequality. CGTN's Yulisa Jamela has more.
Poverty in South Africa is a broad and complex issue. Deep inequalities under apartheid government left millions below the poverty line. Apartheid is a system of segregation or discrimination on grounds of race. The system was officially abolished in 1994, but its decades-long legacy left a lot of destruction. Therefore, South Africa began the post-apartheid era facing formidable challenges.
The question of poverty in Africa is something that is really contested. For many people, they attribute this to signs of inability of African countries to plan correctly. But I think we need to look far beyond this. We need to look back to the colonial history of African countries. Many of the colonial powers saw African countries as being purely sites for extraction and exploitation. And so the infrastructure built has invariably been just for the extractive industries.
Currently, between 45 and 55% of South Africans are estimated to be engulfed by poverty. But South Africa's post-apartheid government has in recent years embarked on numerous poverty reduction strategies in order to address poverty and inequality in the country. One of those measures is the Youth Employment Initiative. It's aimed at addressing the most pressing socio-economic challenges in South Africa, particularly poverty and unemployment among the youth. The initiative provides work experience opportunities for young people on a scale never been seen before in the country. The initiative is as a result of effective collaboration between business, labor, and government.
As poverty, unemployment, and inequality decline, business will also see that it is able to grow. As young people gain skills and work experience, you will find that as a business, you are able to thrive. And as business grows and thrives and employs more people and pay better wages, so are the lives of ordinary people improved as well.
The South African government has also officially introduced another measure to mitigate poverty. A national minimum wage was introduced in January 2019 to protect workers from unreasonably low wages.
So we saw the national minimum wage introduced, which attempted to stabilize the lowest wages that are paid. But we still have that huge discrepancy, and that leads to the high levels of income inequality.
Government is well aware and cognizant of the challenges at hand. One of the other projects that have recently been introduced to deal with poverty issues is the development of the infrastructure. Government has undertaken to collaborate further with business and labor in other projects to do all it can to ensure that poverty is alleviated in this country sooner than later. Yolisa Njabela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's move over to France now. A new curfew in 9 major French cities has come into force. It's part of government efforts to curb the rising COVID-19 infections there. 20 million people are mandated to be home by 9 p.m. or face a fine. Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Stéphane Gatumel runs a restaurant in central Paris. Already hit once by the spring lockdown, he fears the new curfew will have serious consequences.
I'm going to stay open for a week to see what happens, see how it all plays out, see if people dare to come to eat, because there's a lot of panic and worry about the virus. If it doesn't work out, then I will have to close.
The second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in France is worsening, so the government is strengthening its response to the crisis. The curfew, affecting nearly a third of the population, is now in force in cities across the country.
The government's trying to balance imposing enough of a shutdown to control the spread of the coronavirus, but without causing lasting damage to the economy.
The government says the curfews will cause a financial hit of more than $1 billion. It's trying to help the hospitality industry with tax exemptions. But on top of the lost income, Stéphane says the measures do not fit into the French lifestyle.
Closing at 9 p.m. doesn't make sense. If the curfew started at 10 p.m, we would be able to get one sitting in, but 9 p.m. is too early. Here in France, people work until 7 or 7:30. They don't eat at that time.
Cafes and bistros have been getting ready for the change in the 9 cities currently on maximum coronavirus alert. Restaurants suffered the spring lockdown, and now an autumn curfew has begun, but with no fixed end in sight to the new measure. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
In England, more places could undergo a stricter lockdown. The moves come after UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's recent announcement of a new three-tier local lockdown system to cope with the second wave of the pandemic. Andrew Wilson reports from London.
The restrictions that started with Liverpool at Tier 3 are spreading across the country. London and York are two cities moving up to Tier 2, meaning people cannot mix with other households indoors. But even though the pubs will stay open for now, it's having an effect.
We went for dinner for my birthday, before lockdown basically.
We're just going out for a meal on our Fridays because it's our night off, and then we're back to studying on Monday.
So this is your final night as a group?
Yeah.
And the cancellations are coming in.
It's had a massive impact. Almost immediately we had cancellations through, and we've had to ring and proactively reach out to people as well. It's the equivalent for us of about £3,500 worth of takings over this weekend coming.
It's dropping again, so we can feel it. Like tonight, it's quite busy, but we can see it already tomorrow for the reservations for tomorrow. It's already dropping.
With the Tier 2 restrictions reaching London, there are now millions of people in England affected by the new measures.
There are 32 boroughs in Greater London, and when it comes to coronavirus, they can hardly be considered equal. On the outskirts of the city, the infection rates can be as low as 70 to 80 per 100,000. But just a couple of miles away, and that figure will double. Now, there was talk of different measures for different parts of the city, but in the end that was abandoned. All the mapping shows that Londoners are crossing those internal boundaries all the time anyway.
In Manchester, local authorities are still resisting the strictest Tier 3 measures. People feel there's not enough support in place.
The further up north you come, I think then the more penalised you have become. So you do get angry. You can't do much about it because the last say is the government.
The government can force the issue, but it doesn't want to.
Of course, if agreement cannot be reached, I will need to intervene in order to protect Manchester's hospitals and save the lives of Manchester's residents. But our efforts will be so much more effective if we work together.
Hospitals are getting busier, and there's still talk of a 2-week circuit breaker later in the month. But for now, a patchwork of restrictions is coming into force, pitting some regions against the central government and leaving many people looking for answers.
Time now for a short break and return your business news. IMF revises Nigeria's economic forecast as government turns down a relief package. And Ethiopia's coffee production and exports rise despite the pandemic.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Time now for your business news. The IMF has predicted a better outlook for Nigeria's economy compared to its estimate in June. The revised forecast comes at a time when Nigeria's government says it's not considering the relief package offered by the World Bank for low-income countries following the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent Phil Ehaza has the story.
The IMF says Nigeria's economy will do better next year. In June, the global body said Africa's largest economy would shrink by 5.4%, but now predicts a contraction of 4.3%.
And from all indications, the economy is being opened gradually. So by December this year, Nigeria may likely open the entire economy. Every sector of the economy will be back again. And this will affect the GDP in a very positive way. Secondly, the oil price in the market is improving. And it's now on the average of $40 per barrel. By December or by first quarter of next year, it may improve to about 50 or so, because more economy in the world will improve.
And as Nigeria's economy improves, the government has turned down a debt relief plan from the World Bank. According to the government, keeping its reputation with its creditors is important. It also insists the country can afford to service its debt without World Bank support. However, Nigeria's debt is at a record level of $82 billion, so it's expected to have to reduce spending in some areas to bring borrowing under control.
Government can also reduce their own recurrent expenditure. Inasmuch that it's not advisable to reduce the number of government employees, because this will likely lead to social unrest. But government can create more system to manage their recurrent expenditure, because as it's now, there are many ghost workers in the payroll of the government.
President Muhammadu Buhari has intensified efforts to ensure new salary platforms are put in place to combat fraud in the civil service.
The World Bank warns that despite African countries like Nigeria recording lower cases of coronavirus compared to other regions of the world, more vigilance is needed to avoid further outbreak of the COVID-19 disease. This, it says, will prevent another phase of lockdown which may cripple the economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's head over to Ethiopia now, which is largely known as the birthplace of coffee Arabica and one of the world's biggest producers and exporters as well. The country's coffee exporters seem to have little to no complaints about the impact of the pandemic on the booming industry. Here's CGTN's Giram Chala with more.
Almost everywhere in the world, and for most people in different countries, the morning coffee is an important day starter. Well, I think I'm one of those people. And in here, what I have is one of the world's finest Arabica coffee. Strong, aromatic, and exciting. Ethiopia's coffee is famous worldwide, and export destinations include Middle East, China, Japan, most of Europe, and the United States. And thanks to the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, coffee trading has become up-to-date, transparent, and quick. It's also helping small-scale coffee growers benefit more.
We are not only exporters of coffee, we are farmers too. Our company alone has from 300 to 400 outgrowers. Besides that, we buy quality coffee with fair price from the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange. Specialty, organic and certified coffee is available for export for the world market. The ECX platform benefits both the coffee growers and exporters equally.
In 2018-2019, Ethiopian exports are believed to have reached 3.98 million bags of coffee. That is 238.8 metric tons, making it the most important African coffee exporter and the 10th largest exporter in the world. And so the government has given due attention for its development. Experts say the all-rounded work from coffee bush to market has paid off.
We used to stop work during the rainy season, but this year we have even strengthened our export capacity. The coordinated work has even made the coffee export remain the leading commodity to still deliver higher results.
Ethiopia's coffee exports are highly supported by Ethiopian Airlines. Africa's largest and most profitable airline has made logistics services easier for coffee producers. And that has helped Ethiopia beat even Brazilian counterparts during these corona pandemic times.
Generally, when coffee exporting countries like Brazil are highly affected by the coronavirus, we have used the market advantage pretty well. The product movement has been assured by our very own airliner too. Therefore, global customers have increased their ties with us for their coffee demands to be met.
According to available data, Ethiopia's coffee domestic demand in Africa's top coffee consumer is expected to remain robust. Ethiopian coffee consumption expected to rise by 2.4% in 2019-2020. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, according to the World Bank, the risk that Ghana might be unable to pay its debt is growing. The country's debt hit $45.4 billion, about 68% of GDP in July. Economists say the coronavirus has partly contributed to the increase in debt as the country borrowed more this year to reduce the impact of the pandemic. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafai reports from Accra.
Ghana's tax revenues took a nosedive when it went into lockdown in March due to the coronavirus pandemic, falling by 26% in the first half of the year. The shortfall meant the government had to borrow more to fund unplanned spending, especially within the health sector.
Expenditure on infrastructure has been going down in the country. It means the amounts of money the country has been borrowing is not being spent on infrastructure, which will expand the productive base of the country. But they are going into social intervention programs, things that may be of benefit to the poor in the short term, but it is not reflecting in the growth potential of the country. And for that matter, repaying these amounts of monies you have borrowed is becoming very difficult.
Ghana's debt jumped to $45.4 billion in July from $37.6 billion last year. The government says the increase is mainly due to the borrowing of $3 billion from the international market, coupled with the effect of COVID-19 and the weakening cedi against the US dollar. Ghana has lifted lockdown restrictions and the economy has begun to bounce back. The IMF says the economy will grow by 0.9% by the end of this year. But economists want the government to do more in raising internal revenue, especially from the country's natural resources like oil, so it can reduce its borrowing.
The country is just not generating enough. And I keep on saying, you cannot tax poor people and be able to raise so much revenue to develop your country. You need to be able to generate so much from your natural resource endowment. And the country is not doing well in that regards. The government of this country, the people of this country have to sit down and look at what is going wrong over there in the extractive sector.
While the country struggles to pay its debt, economists want the government to seek debt relief from their creditors.
That is already being considered. Ghana's finance minister has called on private sector creditors to also join an extended G20 debt service suspension initiative that allows participating nations to delay payments. The initiative has since April deferred at least $5 billion of debt for more than 40 developing countries.
For now, it's uncertain if Ghana will get some debt relief from its creditors, but the World Bank has urged African countries, including Ghana, to rein in spending and increase tax revenues to avoid defaulting on their debt. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The sport news coming up after the break. Here are some highlights. Kenya's national boxing team hits camp as it prepares for last round of Tokyo 2020 qualifiers.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Let's take a look now at what's happening in the world of sport. Well, Kenya has managed to qualify just 2 boxers for the now postponed Tokyo Olympic Games. The team, popularly known as the Hit Squad, is back in training with the hopes of getting a few more boxers to book their ticket to Rio. CGTN's Muhammad Abubakar now reports.
Following the lifting of some COVID-19 restrictions, the Kenyan boxing team has resumed training. Top of the mind of all in camp is how to get more boxers to Tokyo. The African qualifiers saw only 2 Kenyans book their ticket, but a final round to be held in France has given more hope to the team.
As we speak, we have already begun our preparations for the world qualifiers that will be the final round of qualification to the Olympics. And since we were not able to qualify a lot of boxers when we were in Senegal, we have now embarked on hard and wholesome training and following a certain set of guidelines. Coronavirus came with both good luck and bad luck. Bad luck since it stopped the Olympics from going on for a long time, and good luck also because now we have got the time to train for most of the stuff that we were not focusing on. Right now, we are dealing with strength, power, and conditioning.
One such boxer trying to qualify is Shafi Bakari, a boxer who only picked up the sport 10 years ago.
I didn't manage to qualify when we were in Senegal due to several errors that the coaches managed to pick them out, and they got to know what I need to change and improve on so that when I get to the qualifiers in France, I can be able to perform better than I did in Senegal. I failed to qualify in Senegal due to errors, and we learn through mistakes and errors. That is why right now we are training to be able to get rid of those errors and qualify once I get to France.
At the camp, Bakari has teamed up with team captain Commander Nick Okoth, a man he has known for the better part of his boxing career.
When I met Commander Nick Okoth, it was way before we joined the national team. We used to be in the same club, the Defaba team. So we kicked off from there, and every single time he would go train, he would drag me along. I was quite lazy at the start. Were it not for me joining up with him, I would still be lazy. But when he came and put his arm around my shoulder and started taking me for training, it became mandatory for me to train alongside him. It remained so for years, till we both managed to join the national team. When we go for international competitions, you will find that he is drawn to fight on the first day, and I am fighting on the second day. And when he picks up his victory, he will come and motivate me to win my fight. And that is why I feel he believes that I can qualify. And it's not just his belief, but I also believe so. And I believe it because it is in his footsteps I am following. Once he lifts his left foot, I place my right foot. Atakapotoa nyayo yake ya kushoto, mimi nimeweka yangu ya kulia.
The Hit Squad members know they have their work cut out for them if they are to join Nick Okoth and Christine Ongare in the plane to Tokyo. But it is a challenge accepted for the joyous camp as they work to have a great showing in France and return home with a few more tickets to the Tokyo Games. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
To football now, where Nick Mwendwa has retained his Football Kenya Federation presidential seat after edging 4 opponents in an exercise conducted in Nairobi on Saturday. Mwendwa will now serve as the president of the National Football Governing Body for a new 4-year term. The incumbent garnered 77 votes, with his closest challenger being former Gor Mahia Chief Executive Officer Lordsvig Aduda, who bagged 5 votes, while former FKF Deputy CEO Herbert Mwachiro came third with 3 votes. The elections had been cancelled twice before by the Sports Disputes Tribunal, but were finally given the all clear on Friday after the tribunal threw out a petition by Nick Mwendwa's predecessor Sam Nyamwewa and 7 others.
Those who challenged, those who got votes, those who never got votes, it's one family. We want to show Kenya how this can be done. We want to show Kenya that we are not interested in being in courts, that we can be fair and we can fight it out, and you can fight it inside there, and you can win. I am humbled today. I just want to say to you guys that I can't pay, but football will pay you in its own way. Football will give you what you ask for.
Majesty.